Hello, thank you for joining us today on Matters of Substance. This is your host, Cargly, and today we have a very special guest with us. We have Ron Seman. Hello, Ron.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Oh, thanks for joining us. I'm really excited for the listeners to hear about what you do. And so, to give you a little bit of background, Ron is the founder of the Indiana Dunes hiking program, and he spends, one of the fun facts I learned today is he's done over 600 hikes in the last year with people. And so we talked a little bit about what this is, and I'd really just love, Ron, for you to take the lead on this and let people know what you are doing out there in the dunes and how you're helping people with this.
What I do is I take people on hikes so that they can experience the nature of nature. So, I could talk. I'm an Indiana master naturalist. I could talk about, the biology, any aspect of the nature that one would want, but I like nature to do the speaking. I want it to touch you in ways it'll make you healthy, mentally, physically, and so I'm the person to guide you, whether it's in the day or at night. I lead multiple night hikes a week, and people are real excited about that because a lot of people don't know their way in the day, and at night it's even worse. So they have someone to guide them. We see stars, moon. The other week we had a great meteor shower. We see beavers, owls, the nocturnal animals. So basically, you could say like a tour guide. I've been hiking over 50 years, and I've been to many national parks. And it's not just hiking, as I say. It's biking, kayaking, snowshoeing, which has become real popular, cross-country skiing, and then simple tobogganing and sledding. Both the state park and national park has a place to go. So that's what I do, and everyone, I do it for veterans, their family, their friends, and this is where you come in, lovers of freedom. So that's everybody.
I love it. That's amazing. I know that you've shared with me that you have met with many, many veterans, and you use that as kind of an outlet, the hiking, for them to find some peace within themselves, it sounds like.
Yeah, so a lot of the veterans have PTSD. They had something traumatic happen to them. And similarly, there's many people who aren't veterans who have trauma, and they're overcoming that. So when you get into nature and you hear the waves crashing and you hear the tree leaves blowing and the birds chirping and everyone hiking, they're in a jovial spirit. They're not like, and so you have human contact, which is the most important. You have conversation. And of course, you don't have to talk. Maybe some people don't talk initially, and then they open up. But it's not just for veterans, not just for those that have some PTSD or other issue. Everyone benefits, and going out in nature is way different than hiking or walking. And hiking is long walking, that's the definition. But if you go in your neighborhood, there's toxins in your neighborhood, herbicides, pesticides, two-stroke weed whackers, horrible sounds from all that, pollution from all the diesel delivery trucks that are prevalent today, school buses. And in your house, there's so many toxins. So I get you, out of your toxic drywall box, out of your toxic car. If you don't think it's toxic, look at the inside of your windows, and it's not dirt. It's fogged up with stuff. Those are chemicals evaporating from all the plastics. So you got to get into nature and get cleansed.
So how did this come about? At what point did you say, I just need to get out there and help people connect to nature and connect myself to nature? Where did that come from?
Well, My parents, their last car was back in 1943. It was a Hudson, so they were active bicyclists since then. They had 5 children. We all rode our bikes from Whiting to the Indiana Dunes and back, and hiked and swam and ate a lot all day. And so I love the Indiana Dunes, and I said, when I get, to be an adult, I'm going to move here. So I would probably hike, once or twice a week when I lived, 30 miles away. But now, once I moved in 1998 to Chesterton, I could hike virtually every day. In 2005, unfortunately, I had so when I was younger, I had mercury poisoning, and that affected my brain. I had what I call catastrophic depression. So in 2004, 2005, it was horrible. I avoided people. The only people I might talk with, are family, my wife, my son, and some other extended family. But so I knew what it was like to be in the gutter, just like not feeling good, avoiding things. So I got a golden retriever for my son, and of course, every day, twice a day, I would be taking him on like hikes, taking him to the beach, swimming, and it was only then. So I had tried all these medicines. There were 16 medicines in every combination, permutation. None of those helped. But when I got out into nature, slowly, I was walking, I lost 10%. I was never like super heavy, but I lost 10% of my body weight. Everything just kept getting better progressively. And so that is like evidence-based. There's a science behind it, and I talk to people about that. But it's getting out into nature, seeing every one of your senses impacts your health. When you see pleasant things, you see waves, leaves, birds, bees floating around, going to the flowers, that helps you. When you hear sounds, that helps you. When you touch the soil, there's a government organization, NIH.gov, which is National Institute of Health. Last year, they published a paper that you should hike barefoot whenever possible. And there's 2 reasons. One is called earthing or grounding. It has to do with electrical charges, and it can make you feel like you have more energy. The second reason is your skin is not a baggie holding your guts in. Your skin is a sponge, and you're absorbing microbes, microscopic organisms. And people say, well, why is that important? Because you have 99 trillion cells, which are microbial, and only 1 trillion big human cells. But it's all those microbes that tune your body. They're the ones that generate the chemicals for your brain, like dopamine. And honestly, the scientists don't have a clue all the chemicals, what they are, and how it affects. But all we can know for sure is getting out in nature has proven to be so good, and it affects those in recovery, veterans, people who have had all kinds of trauma. And in my case, so it was a chemical problem related to poisoning of mercury, playing with it in chemistry class and elsewhere.
And that was before we knew the impact of mercury.
Yeah, so I'm talking about in the 60s and 70s. It wasn't so much the liquid mercury that has an effect, but it evaporates. And so you're breathing that, and that's so many chemicals. When they're in their liquid state or particle state, it might be not so bad, but when it starts evaporating and you're breathing it, that means it's in your blood and it's everywhere.
Yeah. And so from from that experience of having this depression, you got the dog, you started walking. When was it that you kind of said, maybe I can bring this to other people too?
So as I was out on the trail, before I got the dog, if I'm just walking, some people would say, hi, high, and that's the extent of the conversation. But when you have a golden retriever, when you have a little puppy, or he was like a perfect specimen of a golden retriever. Everyone just loved him, and they would stop to talk. And so that was, having that dog was a gateway to communication. If I saw a person that was holding a map, I knew they were lost. I knew they didn't know the area very well. So I come up with this dog. They're willing to talk to me. I'm not some axe murderer. And so, his name, by the way, is Aslan, and he has quite a story. When he was 18 months old, he had cancer, and he had to have chemotherapy, and that chemotherapy involved steroids, and he became a very powerful, beautiful dog, but larger than most Goldens. And so everyone just was amazed seeing him, including the breeder. So I would say, of all the things that really got me into hiking, was having a Golden, which is a sport dog, which means he just can't lay around the house. You got to go. And it forces you, whether it's early in the morning or midday or later, evening, you have to get out. And that's why pets are so good, because you see their cute faces or their behavior. They're coming up and they're being sweet to you, and you just got to be that same way back to them. And so it gets you out, gets you healthy. So that's what got me in hiking on a daily basis.
So then you would happen upon people who were lost,
Yeah.
and then you'd be like, hey, let's do it together,
yeah.
right?
So I would say, oh, well, it's a little complicated. You got to turn left, turn right, go down this hill, up these stairs. I said, I'll tell you what, I'll go that way. So I don't care. I got time. So I would take them on this little, it could be a mile or whatever. And so I'm a prolific user I do Christian ministry, and I do a ton on Facebook. So I said, hey, I'm going to start creating events. And so people came. They actually looked at the stuff and said, hey, I'm going to go to the dunes or wherever I had it. And so we would start doing that. And it just snowballed to last year, 612 hikes. Oh, and the pandemic really was a boost. On March 1st of 2020, the National and State Park said no contact with humans. We're shutting down all programs. So I know that nature, building your immune system, is important. So simultaneous to that, the governor of Illinois closed all the parks. The mayor of Chicago closed the 20 miles of beautiful lakefront. Where are people going to go? So we were increased. We had up to 6 million visitors. We had way over 1 million more, or 2 million more. So they get to the park. They didn't have maps even. Some people were first-time visitors. They didn't have maps, didn't have people. So I'm out there on the trail, or I will sit. There's some park benches at the state park by the parking lot. And so people would come. I would just say, I notice you're from Illinois or from Iowa or whatever. Do you need any assistance? And a good percent of them would say, yeah. Some people would say, no, I'm from Valpo. But anyway, so it just kept going, and I would walk and talk. So I know about the biology, the history. I could talk about Diana the Dune. She was a great character. Or the Illinois Senator Paul Douglas, which helped save, or the greatest hiking club in history, the Chicago Prairie Club. So I would talk to people all of that, and they would just love it. And as I say, I'm a salesman for the dunes. When you have a great product, it's so easy. And so I just love talking to people about it. And as I say, my hikes are all free. If you want me to remain silent, they're $19.99. But there's never any cost. But we can just listen. We can be quiet. I've had hikes. I said, okay, we're just going to go for this first 20 minutes and just listen. It's amazing. We see the pileated woodpecker. Sounds like a machine gun pecking away at the tree. We see little songbirds flying, and we see, if we just stop and don't move, you'll see maybe deer coming through or rabbits, squirrels. I got a 1 in a million photograph of an albino raccoon, which was golden in color. So no one has ever seen one before, but we got the picture of it, and it's 1 in a million that have a defect. So when you're out every day, you're gonna see things that no one else has. One cool story, and I'll stop, is so there was a polar vortex. It was minus 15 at the beach. The whole lake was frozen. The wind chill was minus 35, and I had 5 layers of clothes on. I had an Elmer Fudd hat on, if you know what that is. I had a neoprene mask over, like scuba divers use, but it covers your nose and mouth. And I had goggles on. Being so cold, I was still warm because I had all the right clothes on. And I'm a big photographer, and I could do videos. I designed something. I use these hunter mittens. They go up almost to your elbow, and there's a zipper. And I put the phone in there with heat packs, and so I can do videos at minus 15 degrees, whereas most smartphones shut down in the 20 degrees Fahrenheit. So last thing is I teach people about photography, and once you start taking photos of flowers and fungi, mushrooms, animals, insects, waves, sunsets, sunrises, you're posting that on social media. Everyone's saying, they're giving you all this positive feedback. So then you keep coming back to nature. And so teaching photography is a great thing to do to get people coming back.
And you mentioned earlier, when we were talking before this recording, you talked about how so if somebody's listening and they want to get into photography, you don't have to have the DSLR. I mean, you could, certainly, but you could also use a smartphone.
Yeah. So I've taken people with $5,000 Canons or Nikons or Sonys, and today's smartphone is incredible. In fact, the iPhone and now even the Android, the night photography is phenomenal. You can take pictures, see the stars. You can see, especially in the fall and winter, you'll see all the network of branches, and there's no blur because all these smartphones have massively fast processors. So they're analyzing lines in the scene, and they're keeping them straight so everything stays in focus. They have exposures from 3 to 10 seconds, which a normal human with a DSLR can't do more than a 30th of a second, and it'll get blurred. So the best phone you can ever have is the one that you have with you, and most people have in a pocket, in a purse, in a backpack. They have a smartphone. And I always tell people, if you really want to be a great nature photographer, so for 3 hours I would hold this one Nikon camera at my chest level. I would have it in the wide angle mode and in fast fire. So if a bird flew by or an animal went, I press that button, I'm taking 10 frames per second, and everything gets in, and then you can crop it. But today, smartphones, they also can fire up to 10 times a second as long as there's enough sunlight. When it's darker, of course, any camera can't go that fast, but there's so much fun, now on smartphones. You can actually do movies, do slow motion videos. It's just so much fun, because I used to do with like a 20-pound VHS camera and recorder. It was like carrying a backpack of stuff, and now it's all in your hand.
That's amazing. And one thing I was thinking, just as you were kind of talking about the birds and the animals that you might see, we have listeners from all over the country. And so we should probably let them know what it is that the Lakeshore, the National Dunes are. What is it? How do you describe it? You have so much interaction with it.
So, there's different estimates, but let's say 10, 12,000 years ago, there was a Wisconsin glacier complex, and it was 1 mile high, 50 miles wide. If you look at Lake Michigan, what's south of Lake Michigan? Indiana. So all the good stuff came to Indiana. Sure, a little bit went to Illinois, a little bit went to Michigan, but it was Indiana. So the actual sand was pushed to where the northern part of Lake Michigan is. It's 307 miles long. The water brought that sand, and the wind blew that sand. So the glaciers didn't stop, say, at the Indiana Dunes. The glaciers stopped, south of there, like in Valparaiso, you'll see all those hills. The beach was actually, say, at Ridge Road or Route 6. So we have all these seeds. We have 375 kinds of birds bringing seeds and dropping them. So we have all this diversity. The Indiana Dunes has 15,349 acres, and we're number 4 in biodiversity, number 4 in the whole country. But guess what? We're all in that small area. If you take Yellowstone, it's 2.2 million, and it doesn't have the species count that we have. And say you're looking for a certain flower or plant at Yellowstone, it's 12 miles over there, and there's not even a trail to get there. Yeah, some scientists document it, but you can't. It's not accessible. So we have accessibility. Every trail goes through ecosystems. You can experience it, and by seeing all those species, seeing them, hearing them, feeling them, touching the dirt, touching the sand, you get microscopic living organisms. And as I say, your skin's not a baggie holding your guts in. Your skin is a sponge. That's why I don't use like the 231 kinds of toxic sunblock. There are some that you can use which are natural. If I want to protect my skin, I just wear long sleeves or long pants or a hat. And if you're wearing a hat, make sure you get one that's covers your neck in the back, because some people forget about that. And I've known people who were scuba divers that got cancer on their neck. They were out in the water, and the water magnified the sun onto them. So it's good to cover yourself if you're going to be out in intense sun. But so many of the trails that I guide people through, like I'll say, what do you want to do? Do you want it flat, walking on dirt? Do you want it rugged, doing dune challenge? But so much of what we do is in the forest, so we don't have, sun is not an issue. And believe it or not, with insects, with mosquitoes, some people put on horrible things like that contain DEET. And there are countries, Puerto Rico, they ban the use of it in their nature preserves where they have bioluminescent ponds. They're real sneaky. You come up there to buy a ticket, and they'll say, oh, these mosquitoes are so bad. We always like to talk to foreigners. What do you do to protect yourself? And you say, oh, I use off backwoods 40 or whatever it is that you say. And they'll say, we're sorry, you can't come in today. You got to take a shower, come back tomorrow. Because those chemicals kill. I mean, our eagle was the symbol of our country. It was almost, extinct because of DDT. And there used to be signs and songs, DDT, it's fine for me. And it wasn't. It made the egg soft. So anyway, the dunes have their incredible biodiversity. We have a tree called the jack pine tree, which is from the northernmost part of our continent. And we have a eastern prickly pear cactus, which is from the south. We have them side by side at West Beach Park. There's nowhere in the world where you have something near Arctic and something from the south together. So we have it, and I show that to people, and so many people heard the name Indiana Dunes National Lakeshore, so they think of Lake Michigan, they think of swimming, beach, some people fishing, boating. But the greatest part of the dunes is, south of the lake, into the dunes itself, into the trees, marshes, wetlands, bogs, fens, the dune and swale. All of the ecosystems have something to offer. And when you explain, and I try to do it in the most simplest form, you just are amazed that it exists. And one fact that I learned, and some people ask me, what did you learn in the last 5 years? And I say tree communication. Within the forest, when you take a step, you're walking over hundreds of miles of tiny fungi which are spread out, and it's connecting the trees and the plants, and they share nutrients. So you're familiar with roots, which you physically see, so that's moisture, water. But the fungi is passing nutrients. So there was a very smart woman, a scientist, and she said, how could this little tree grow in the forest when you look up and all you see is a canopy of leaves? It's impossible. How could this little tree grow? So no man, no scientist ever asked that question before. And so she started studying it. And then she found out, well, the little tree communicates to the big tree. There's actually a language that consists of roughly 40 words. Of course, they're not audible, and they're maybe like electrical impulses, but they're saying, hey, you're blocking the light, send me some nutrients. So then those fungi, that fungi underground, they take like a toll road, they take a little bit of it, and then they spread. So everything in the forest, it is not competition, it's cooperation. And so we could go to Brinca Cross Gardens, where they have over 400 species of daffodils and over 200 different kinds of plants that communicate. Some of those are not supposed to be up here in the north, but the other ones, these hostas, they're communicating and sharing nutrients. So there's a hosta from Georgia next to a hosta from Chicago, and they're communicating and sharing. It's once you understand, and your understanding will grow each time you're there. You don't even want to take a shovel and go into the dirt because you're like breaking stuff up. You have such respect for nature, and it builds respect because you as a human are 1,000 times more complicated than nature of the ground, insects, and plants. We are the star on the earth. We have, and so when you start to realize, wow, I think, and I have creative moments. I help people. I love people. They help me. It's a cooperation. You start to understand everything starts to fit together. And you just simply can't do that if you're sitting watching Judge Judy. Yeah. So anyway, I'm not picking on Judge Judy, but just, television, just sitting. Sitting is the new smoking. And so a lot of people stopped smoking, but some of them started sitting, and you got to get moving. And so I'm able to stay very active because I stay very active. Well, once you stop, once you slow down, it's all over. That's why people who are over 50 who break a hip, the average life expectancy is 5 years because they're slowed down, and the toxins start building. They're not out in nature. Muscles start atrophy. It's just a snowball going downhill.
I like how you kind of mentioned that we're all very connected, and I think my favorite part of what you just said is that the trees aren't in competition. They're in
cooperation. Exactly.
Sorry, excuse me. In cooperation. And I just thought that was a beautiful sentiment. I mean, how much could we grow if we were in cooperation?
I could take exactly. Yeah. So let's say your neighbor. So let's say you know about computers, and your neighbor is so not into electronics. So you spend some time with them, and guess what? You find out they can cook they're baking you stuff, cooking you stuff. You get interested in that, and so everyone shares. But so I'll say this: I've spent my whole life probably with over 40 organizations volunteering. I retired at a young age, and it gave me freedom. But when I volunteer, I don't think about my problems. I'm helping people with their problems. Or like I volunteered with working with dogs, and oh man, this dog, I want to help this dog be joyful. I want to make sure it's not hurt. I want to make sure it's fed, make sure it gets water. Speaking of water, 70% of Americans are chronically dehydrated. So why is that important? Think of how much water, think of how it's the source, of creating blood. If you don't have water, you don't have blood. Every organ is impacted by water, and 70% are chronically dehydrated. What does that mean? You wake up dehydrated. At noon, you're dehydrated. Some people don't drink water hardly at all. They drink juices or other things, milk, but that's not the same as water. And so if you're dehydrated, you don't feel good. You don't even know why you don't feel good. But when you go out hiking and you see people like sometimes on some hikes, I have set a timer every 15 minutes. It goes off in a quiet way, and I'll take a sip. If you feel thirsty, you're already dehydrated. You should be drinking. So some people say, oh man, I just hiked this 2 miles in the sun on the beach, and they take a bottle and completely down it. Guess what? They're not getting the benefits. It's not absorbing into them. It's going into their stomach, and they're going to the bathroom. They're not benefiting. So you just can't take that bulk amount of water. You're supposed to slowly sip it. And so I talk to people about, of course, hiking equipment. You don't have to spend, people are buying, $200 waterproof boots that they don't need when I have a favorite, these water shoes, which you can go in the water with. And so the rocks or other unknown stuff on the bottom of the lake, it doesn't bother you. And so those are lightweight shoes. And you can go anywhere in the dunes with those. Or you can just use, standard running shoes or barefoot. Sandals I don't recommend because you're walking and little sticks get between your foot and the sandal, and then you're stopping, it hurts. So I try to get people to understand you don't have to spend, $1,500 in gear to go hiking. It can be what you have, and as you get some money, you can increase, buy this or that. And I talk to people about hiking gear, talk to them about the trails, of course. What do you want to do? Do you want to go around scenic stuff or rough stuff or flat and easy stuff? Maybe I've taken people who have had hip surgery last month or knee replacements. So how do you do a hike with me? So I publish hikes at IndianaDunesHiking.com. However, what I love the most is when someone texts me or emails me and says, hey, Ron, can we go to Chalberg Farm next Thursday? And I'll say, sure. I'll say, do you want to go sunrise, 10 a.m., or a real popular one is sunset, twilight, moonlight, starlight. And I also have line lasers. I do photography at night with lasers. No one is doing that. And I show it to people, and you just have to experience it. Red and green, powerful lasers spreading out. You see 1,000 points of light looking through the marram grass or the forest. And so now people, they get out their cameras and they're taking photos because they've never seen anything like it. But so, I've been written about or on TV or radio, and a lot of the people talk about you don't just have a hike, you have an adventure, and that's it. In fact, recently I've been trying not to say the word hike. Like I'll say, we have an adventure at the Kemmel Beach parking lot, we're going to take the Dune Ridge Trail because it is an adventure. We are seeing the 6-line race runner lizard go at 18 miles an hour all around us. We're seeing sandhill cranes that wake up at sunrise and take off just at sunrise. They know, you, even on a cloudy day I'm there, and they're taking off. How do they know that the sun? I can't see the sun, and yet they take off. So it's an adventure every time, and the things. Well, anyway, so you just have to come and experience it. And as I told others, I have pretty much 100% retention rate, which means if you've gone on a hike, say you're from Indianapolis, you go on a hike, you enjoy the nature because I revealed it to you. It's not even so much me, it's the nature. It's the great product we have. We're the museum of nature and industry. So people who are living in Indianapolis, Fort Wayne, South Bend, maybe they come a few times a year. They're texting me, emailing me saying, hey, Ron, we're coming October 14th. Do you think you could lead a hike? And I do. And then they say, April 20th next year, 2023, we're having a family reunion. Can you do that? One of my funnest family reunions was a family. Half of them had moved to France when they were young, and half of them stayed in America. So they came together, and of course the European ones, the French, they know all about hiking. They actually brought hiking stuff on the airplane with them. And the American people, they didn't have as much, but they all had fun. And it was just, it's like team building. If you've ever been in a corporate situation and you don't know the person who's in the cubicle next to you, well, when you get out and do team building, when you get out on the trail, everything changes. You start talking to people, and it's all about value. You now begin to understand this person. You value them. You love your neighbor as yourself, and the whole world changes one step at a time.
Oh, I love that. One step at a time. Absolutely. So I have a question. As you've been describing the lakefront a little bit, I thought I'd love to know, what is your most favorite thing you've experienced on a hike?
The most exotic thing that I've experienced involves man, architecture, and the sun. And so it was May 12th of 2020. I was at Coles Bog, the beach. They call that Boaters Beach. And I'm looking across Lake Michigan. I had just seen the first monarch, which I was thrilled about. And I'm looking across the lake, and I see this spotlight. And I think, this spotlight, it's a Coast Guard helicopter, and it's got a light on. It's just looking for stuff. And I look at it, the light is not moving. So at that time, I had a big Nikon camera. I zoom in, and I realize that light is coming from a building. So it only lasted 4 minutes, and the light went away. So I go home excitedly, and I start using Google Earth, Google Maps, blowing up the pictures. It's super high megapixel. I figured it out. On Michigan Avenue, you have Grant Park, and you have the beam, like silver beam. Well, on the corner of Randolph and Michigan, there's a building which is now occupied mostly by Crane Chicago business. Anyway, the roof is at a 45-degree angle. So certain times in the day, the sun, one time in the day, the sun will hit that, and it reflects just like a mirror, 28 miles across. And so I'd only seen it one time in my life. And I kept coming back at different times and wouldn't see it. So AARP magazine is doing a big article about my adventures, and they sent a photographer from Chicago. So I explained that to her, and we were on the beach house blowout at the state park. So I had just explained it to her, and we turn, and I see it. So she's got two $5,000 Canon cameras with monster lenses. She goes and takes that photograph, and that was the most shocking thing. A second one, which involves man and nature architecture, is at sunrise in July. If you're at the state park, the sun will come up over the lake. Well, everyone's focused on that sun, and I tell people, turn to the left right before the sun comes up. The city of Chicago turns silver with reflection. It just pops out. So again, it's just a few minutes. Also at sunset, there are times like in October where you're looking at the sun going down, and bam, Chicago turns orange, like it's another fire, like Mrs. O'Leary's back with a second cow. It's just incredible. So, but now if I just focus on nature, seeing a monarch butterfly or just fluttering around, that's the hardest thing to photograph. A monarch is far more mobile than a fighter plane, more than a Harrier aircraft. It just goes this way, bam, it goes that way, it goes that way. I do slow motion videography. It takes 240 pictures per second. And I love seeing a bee. My friend in the Duneland Photography Club, she just posted on Instagram this 10-second video, and I was flabbergasted. There's this big bee on a flower, and this bee about 1/10 its size lands on the back of the bee. It tangles its wings, and they both tumble down this yellow flower. Oh my gosh, I never seen anything like it. So nature, we see, you're walking down the trail, and I'll say, stop, look at, and here's this spider walking across. Or yesterday we were at Ambler Flatwoods in Michigan City, and that is a Shirley Hines property. So there's 3 of us in this one part, and all of a sudden, what I call like an inchworm is rappelling down from a tree right in front of our face. It gets to the ground. So I say, I'm going to take a photo. When I go with my camera close to it, it straightens out. It looks like a stick. How could this little tiny thing have a defense mechanism against this, 200-pound person, or all of us are 700 pounds or something, whatever? How could it know to do that? It totally tricked us. It made itself look like a stick. So I said, okay, let's back away. So we backed away and zoomed in, and then it turned back, say sort of like S shape, and starts wiggling across. I mean, so that is a tiny thing. And or we were on one trail, and it was covered with green moss. This moss takes years, even decades to grow, and it was just all covered because people hadn't gone down this one trail before. So you'll just discover all this stuff. And one thing I love to show is that nature wastes nothing. So here's one last example. There's this tall tree, say 4 foot, 3 foot in diameter, and say it gets hit by lightning or it just rots, it ages, rots, and falls over. So now you have this big tree there. But if you look closely, it starts to fall apart with chunks, and it's not insects taking it apart, it's fungi. So the fungi is taken apart, and it's got big chunks, then small chunks like a little rock, but it's wood, like say an inch in diameter. Then you'll see smaller quarter inch, and then you'll see like sand and like a powder. So that tree has now become fertilizer for the whole forest. So that whole forest is now benefiting from that tree. So don't feel sorry for that tree. Oh, it broke, it's dead. No, it is fertilizer. That tree is now part of all the other trees. So relate that to humans. We're living in this neighborhood. We just can't be isolated. When we do that, we're not going to feel good. So the more we get together, the more we help each other. The sum total of the parts is way better than one part.
Absolutely, I agree. We are coming up to the end of this episode, and I wanted to take a moment to highlight some of the events that you have excuse me, some of the events that I know are coming up. I believe there is an obstacle course on September 11th that you know about at least. And then
at West Beach, there's an obstacle course. It was designed for military first responders, but we have spots left. And guess what? We have scholarships. So instead of you having to pay $150 or $200, it's free. So you could contact me by emailing Indiana Dunes Hiking at Gmail, Indiana Dunes Hiking at Gmail, all one word, and we could connect you. So if you have a hardship, we understand hardships, so you could enter for free, and that's September 11th. And September 9th, I'm leading, it's called America's Hike at 6 p.m. So if you go to my website, the IndianaDunesHiking.com, I have pointers to everything.
And the one that's in the evening is going to go into the nighttime with the moon, right?
So on the 9th, it's a 99% full moon. So we're going to take Diana the Dunes 250 stairs to the beach, and we get there. Guess what? I timed it. So I have curated hikes. You're going to see the sunset. Then we're going to come back at twilight. Then we're going to be in the dark. I have powerful lights. You could bring your own flashlight. We're going to go and see the obstacles. So maybe you're not super mobile. You're not going to be able to race in this obstacle course, 5K or 10K, but you're going to be able to see it like no one else. You can see it. And the night hikes are just phenomenal. And you'll see starlight, moonlight. And the other day we had meteorites, the meteor shower, which was just phenomenal. So, definitely come. We can't have like 2,000 people on this hike. I've been involved with hikes at the state park where we had 900 on first day hikes. So, but anyway, you want to get communicating and reserve a spot for you.
Awesome. Well, thank you. I'm so excited to let the people know what you're doing. And if you're in Northwest Indiana or planning to be in Northwest Indiana, reach out to Ron and go see some of the beautiful nature we have surrounding us. I think so often people in this community take it for granted, this natural resource we have. And so Ron's there to show you about it.
And if you like texting, the number for getting a hold is 219-370-9119. So I picked the 911. So it's like an emergency. You got to get in nature. 219-370-9119.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Ron. I really appreciate it. And thank you for listening.
Thank you for having me.